Still to come at 9, we're off to Britain's favourite Spanish seaside town, in Benidorm, Brits, booze and bikinis. But first, a look at one of Britain's most exciting underground music scenes in Black British Music, the UK Underground. This programme contains strong language and flashing images throughout.
For years, Black British music existed in plain sight. It blasted from pirate radio stations hidden in tower blocks, it echoed through youth clubs and council estates and raves. It travelled between friends on burnt CDs and grainy music videos and word of mouth. Entire genres were being invented just a few miles from Parliament, yet for much of Britain, they may as well have been invisible. Then, things started to change. In 1996, after watching black artists repeatedly overlooked by a mainstream music industry, Kanye King created the MOBO Awards. If Britain wasn't going to celebrate this music, then Black Britain would. A few years later, Craig David took UK garage into millions of homes, proving that a distinctly Black British sound could dominate the charts. Then came September 2003. An 18-year-old from a council estate in East London walked onto a stage at the London Grosvenor Park Hotel and accepted the Mercury Prize for an album he'd largely made in his bedroom.
I love you.
Dizzy Rascal's Boy in the Corner beat the likes of Coldplay and Radiohead, and just like that, grime wasn't an underdog anymore. Around the same time, another revolution was happening on television. Shut out by MTV and the traditional gatekeepers, Black British artists were building their own platform with the launch of Channel U.
Blazer on production. Sometimes I swing, but it gets on top. Napa, where you there? I'm here, blood.
It broadcast an entire generation of British rappers into living rooms. And the momentum didn't stop there. Estelle crossed the Atlantic and won a Grammy. Skepta brought grime back to the Mercury Prize. Stormzy became the first Black British solo artist to headline Glastonbury. Dave turned a Brit Awards performance into one of the most powerful political moments in British television. Black British music became the backbone of Britain's music industry, today generating an astounding £24.5 billion, accounting for 80% of everything Britain has recorded in the last 30 years. From bassline to garage to grime to drill to Afro swing, Black Brits have birthed genre after genre, rewiring the British music soundscape each time.
I'm saying though, ping oil, ayy. Shut down shows or raves. I know her from the estate. Who's your boyfriend? What is his name?
Who's that bully for me? Oi, who's that bully for me?
So if you let me know. Let me in the studio. I got 21 seconds before I got to go.
Do you really like it? Do you really like it?
Back in the day, me and you, baby, we used to have fun. Until you delivered that baby. Look, that's not my son. Believe me, anybody can't tell me that is my son. Why? Aye, big man, stop doing that.
Skinny nigga with a fat belly. I'm selling cheese straight off the Blackberry.
Put your records on. To life, then to reality.
Did you see what I done? Came in a black Benz, left in the white.
The story of Black British music isn't one of sudden success. It's the story of a culture that spent decades building its own stages, its own audiences, and its own industries until the mainstream had no choice but to pay attention. And today, nowhere tells this story more clearly than the UK's underground rap scene. Because by the early 2020s, something had stalled. Drill was cooling off, Afro swing had already peaked and passed, mainstream British rap to the rest of the world and locals alike began sounding somewhat homogenous. People were begging for something new, asking, what's next for UK rap? And on a cold November night in 2024, the 8th to be exact, Conglomerate dropped.
All my cars are black, all my barbs are black, easy on the go. Bottom hard to catch, 21 car my hand.
A joint album by 3 artists, Lancey Foe, Len and Femi Guerrero.
From India, I text my man on WhatsApp.
Espanol with a Spanish hoe, finna take that home. Big bad hoe, told me I'm growing wings, but she wanna meat and bone.
Rap, trap, drill percussions, warped auto-tune, diasporic influences, electronic influences, all merged together and sitting underneath a look that borrowed punk's aggression, but pushed past it into something closer to avant-garde. Leather, distressing silhouettes that owed as much to the runway as it did to the streets.
Len, Lancy and Fimi, man. That's like Ed, and Eddie, fam.
Conglomerate went on to become #1 on the UK's official hip-hop and R&B charts, shaping the cultural zeitgeist of UK rap and spotlighting a subculture that had been quietly rising for years. Its charting answered the question everyone had been asking, solidifying the UK underground rap scene as the future of British rap. Before I go any further, and before I continue to use that phrase UK underground one more time, I need to actually tell you what I mean by it. This scene, this genre, this subculture doesn't have a proper name yet, and UK underground is just the label that's stuck. And that word underground is way too broad for what's being used to describe here. I'm not referring to any small unsigned artist making music outside the mainstream. I'm talking about one specific scene, one specific subculture, and that naming problem is something that I come back to later on in the video. Anyway, this scene had been bubbling for years before Conglomerate, but this charting officiated it. It was the catalyst. It set off one of the biggest cultural shifts Black British music has seen in years. And its rise ran parallel to something even bigger than just the music. The birth of a new Black British subculture.
Niggas don't even know this is the next generation, bro.
National pride, leather, Osbat chains, a community of young Black Brits unafraid to raise their flag and also put their middle finger to it in the same breath. The momentum didn't stop after Conglomerate. Drake brought out one of the scene's very own on stage during his Wireless headline set. Others went on to play global festivals. Rolling Loud's Orlando edition in May 2026 brought out an entire cohort of UK underground rappers, solidifying the sound's footprint at a major American festival. But like any cultural shift this big, the road here hasn't been clean. UK underground has become a flashpoint, accused of being watered down, cashed in on and co-opted by, to put it bluntly, non-Black people. Some of the artists who helped build this sound from nothing are watching others run with it faster, and there's a tension there that I want to get into. Let's go. Hi guys, welcome back to the Discourse Department. My name's Sibusi Siwe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then I'm so sorry to you. But if you're watching, congratulations, you win, because you get to see my outfit. I'm wearing this little cute little white number from 1X Blue that I'm so in love with. Shout out 1X Blue. This is not paid, but honestly, top 5 favorite brands ever. My tights are from Amazon. I also have my little Osbat chain, courtesy of my cousin. It's not mine, but I wanted to LARP for the video. As usual, I have some extra thoughts that I'll be sharing on my second podcast called Is This a Safe Space? That is a lot more conversational, less researched, less curated, and it's just me chatting shit basically. So if you want to hear me speak, but in a more conversational manner, go and have a look at that. Also, as usual, guys, please click the subscribe button. Please follow me across socials. In my last video, I said I wanted to get to 5K by the end of by the end of July. And I am pleased to announce we are almost at 10K and July's not even finished yet. So I'm shifting the goalpost. I want 20K followers by the end of August. Please, please get me there, guys. Click subscribe, like, share, comment, do whatever you need to do. But let's grow this channel. A quick disclaimer before I go ahead. Please do not put me on a moral pedestal, because if you do, I will disappoint you. If not now, then most definitely in the future. I am very hypocritical. My views are very conflicting. I'm not an activist. I'm not the face behind any kind of social cause. There is no agenda behind any of my videos. I do this because it is fun. Outside of these videos, you do not know me. And if you create an idea of me in your head, if you put me on the moral pedestal, it's gonna suck so badly for you when I don't live up to that. And I just had to get that out there because my account is growing and things are getting real parasocial. You guys need to relax. Anyway, love you. Let's get into it. The UK underground is a subculture that came out of the early 2020s, and it's a Black subculture. The faces representing it today globally might look not Black, but that diversity at the forefront doesn't rewrite where this subculture, where this genre originates, and that's Black people. But it is a subculture, and every subculture has two things. They have a uniform and a soundtrack. Punks had leather jackets and the Sex Pistols, mods had Parkers and Northern Soul, chavs have Burberry and Bassline. The UK underground have their own sonic heroes and dress code, and I want to start by getting into the music. This UK underground rap scene subculture genre has a very long lineage, and asking how far back it goes is like asking how long's a piece of string. People are really pedantic about this part of the conversation, and if you really wanted to, you could go all the way back to the 70s, but for the sake of this video, I do want to keep the sonic part on the surface, just because because there's quite a few videos that have already done the job of diving into this scene, this genre, with a lot more of a detailed approach to the sonics. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to keep it on the surface. But the sound as we know it and my starting point is the 2020s. The Guardian put it nicely. After grime gave way to road rap in the mid-2000s and Afro swing rose through the mid-2010s, this is simply the next evolution of homegrown rap. And while Dave and Stormzy and others sell out arenas, this new wave is starting to rival them in popularity with considerably more edge. The thing about the UK underground sound is that there isn't one. No two artists sound alike, and that's what makes the genre. This isn't a scene that's built around a shared sonic formula in the same way that drill or grime were. Authenticity and expression mean so much more than genre convention within the sound. On one end, sonically, you can hear some of the more American influences, so jerk beats, some of that rage rap, and on the other hand, full melodic auto-tune. You can hear a lot of diasporic influences as well. There's also a lot of nods to Britpop and British indie, and within all of that, within that mush-up of different influences, different artists take it to different places. Someone like Lancey Foe moves between experimental production with trap and drill influences.
Yeah, she call me Lancey, I Lancey. Pouring up a red cup, I'm empty. Top of the floor, see what I'm saying? GT Chrome, see what I'm saying? Chrome on the Benz, see what I'm saying? Stop bobbing your head to the beat, you dickhead. You know that you do them things. You know that you do that stuff, you dickhead. You know that you do that stuff.
Fimi Guerrero's all over the place, but probably closer to Rage with R&B and electronic influences.
Ras came in, hello. Fuck this girl involved. Big range ain't no vote. She wanna come avec moi. Up, down Louis Vuitton. Stop in the blood Louis Vuitton. She wanna hold up my gun. I can't sleep. Take some X. I can't geek. Mandy, I can't sleep. Take some X. I can't geek.
Len sits somewhere between Alte, Afro, but also trap influences.
Hey, the baby she fire, the baby she cold. The baby she tired, put her in the zone. My guess is full up, I need my body full up. Fuck me before I go on. She wanna keep me good up.
YT leans hardest into jerk, wrapped in melodic auto-tune, but still very British influences.
Been around the world, every country, different crush. Been around all girls, take a touch, take a touch. Put up free baddies, how tall up, put up free baddies, how greedy. Money got my trust falling down. Let her know I'm coming to a town.
Jim Legacy's genre bending across UK rap, alternative R&B, emo rap, a bunch really.
Yeah, I've been living on the floors, I know. Fighting with my throats, I know. Ones in the ends, yeah. Said I change it depends. Come up off the roads on my own too. I never had a.
It's a very big scene with a lot of artists, and these five probably make up the crux of it. But within the scene, there are also smaller artists who are rising quite rapidly. Young E-Man.
I live my life. No, I'm a misfit. Mama, it's alright.
Kwezi.
Pretty girl must stop with the lies. She entitled, got a model girl and she entitled.
Sibo.
I was like Quay on a pushback trying to get peas of a pack like Crow. I was like Quay on a pushback trying to get peas of a pack like Suge Knight.
Finesse Kid.
Your girl's on me, so I might just take away your bird like Elon Musk.
Shy Cartier.
Why they tryna act like they're real, it don't feel right. And what them girls ain't built like, come from a different cloth.
Tebow.
Walking the party, I'm dapping the bouncer, telling them West.
And Bex.
Hey, I love me in it, girl. Why you so in it, girl?
Ultimately, Britishness does sit at the center of it. I mean, I dive into this with the fashion, but there have been a few conversations around how sonically this sits really nicely adjacent to American underground rap. But to me, I don't think that's the case. It still sounds very, very British, and that's because of the other influences of other Black British genres that came before it that we had to go through in order to land where we are now. You can hear and you can feel that through things like ad-libs, YT's ad-lib.
Good shout. I go by the name of YT from London, England. # Oi. You might not know me, but you probably heard the Oi.
Hello. Welcome to Abby Online Teach. And the letters today are O and I, or you might know them as O and I. And when you see them together, they make the sound Oi. Are you ready to practice? Oi! Oi! Oi!
Older UK tracks get pulled back in as samples all the time. There still really is a very British center point to all of this. There are a few key timeline moments that I want to get into and just touch on. But before I map this out, this is not an exhaustive timeline. I know what this fan base is like. You guys are going to come for me in the comments all about, you missed this and da-da-da-da. If I were to sit and try and capture every single release by every single artist that has made up the blueprint for this scene, that would need an entirely separate video, which I'm not going to do. This is more like a broad strokes overview built for anyone watching this who is new to the scene and maybe wants to weigh in or is just curious. In the late 2010s, artists like House of Pharaohs and Lancey Foe are starting to build outside the mainstream, laying down the groundwork. In 2019, Lancey drops Friend or Foe, which is not his first project, but to me, his best and the most significant around this time. In 2022, what is now known as Antag Fest hosts a Nigerian independence party at Hackney's Colour Factory. Founded by Glory Boy and May K, Antag Fest would go on to become quite integral to this scene. Play PM also launched in 2022 and quickly became one of the scene's essential gathering spots. Complex put it quite well. It's often said there are no subcultures anymore and that the internet has made the world too small. Well, Play PM is here to change that. Led by Kane, that's exactly what this is/was. It's a real room in real life where the scene's most online, most scattered fans can actually stand in the same place at the same time. I think that nightlife is a really important place to understand the subculture, especially through an anthropological lens, because it's where subcultures gather, and this video essay wouldn't be complete if I didn't touch on them, especially given nightlife in London has been dying, but the underground is one of the subcultures that never really gave up on it. 2023 is where things start to move in parallel. Jim Legacy drops Homeless Nigga pop music. Fimi Guerrero puts out both Immigrant and Black. Len releases Legoland. YT drops Still Swagging. Individually, these look like scattered underground moments, but in hindsight, they were separate pushes building towards the same momentum. The summer of 2023 is also when Lost Boys debuted their Boat Parties, another real physical gathering point on the water this time, at a time where most of the scene's community still kind of lived almost entirely online. By 2024, these artists had properly cemented their sound, their style, and their identity. 2024 was the beginning of the invasion. You can see every bit of the groundwork from all the years prior finally accumulating into something that I think really speaks for this subculture as something that can break past all the noise. YT dropped Black and Tan featuring Lancey Foe alongside visuals by Loza, and it really became the song of the summer, gathering a more global audience. Fimi Guerrero drops New World Order, Len drops Cobalt, subsequently selling out the Village Underground, and in November we get Conglomerate, which goes on to become #1 on the UK's official hip-hop and R&B charts. 2025 sees the release of 2 highly anticipated albums. We get Oi by YT and Black British Music by Jim Legacy. 2025 is also the point where this term underground rap starts making very little sense because these artists are now exploding on a global scale. To contextualize the fashion of this UK underground scene, especially in parallel to the music, I want to compare it to the fashion of the genres that came before it. Early 2000s grime artists wore what was functional and also accessible, but obviously very stylish too. But the garage heavy club scene at the time, they rejected this look. They wanted iron silk shirts and trousers. And if you weren't dressed up, then you weren't getting into the clubs. The fashion associated with grime, what we now remember that fashion to be, ultimately was a rejection of the very elitist and flashy exclusivity of some of these clubs. Ultimately, it was also just reflective of what London's black working class were wearing at the time, because that's who was making the music. The Nike Air Max, new era fitted caps, Averex leather jackets, lots of tracksuits with so many different colorways. They weren't really heavy on designer, but they did have a lot of brand loyalty, especially to brands like Adidas or Nike. As drill music emerged, on the other hand, the subculture that coincided with that sound were a lot more minimal and stripped back. And a lot of this is political. A bunch of politicians were making claims that drill music directly correlated to knife crime. These are claims that to this day are still unverified and rooted in nothing but racism. And as a result of that, drill artists had to navigate a very hostile media, a very hostile work environment, especially as musicians. YouTube were pulling down songs, shows were getting shut down, and in some cases, police were attempting to bar them from making music at all. So the solution effectively was to still find a way to get the music out, but find a way to obscure their identities at the same time. And this ultimately reflected in the fashion, as anything usually does. Face coverings like balaclavas and ski masks and bandanas became really popular. After being hit with an injunction barring him from releasing music under that name, Scribs, later renamed LD, started performing in a Phantom of the Opera style mask. Afro swing was a really interesting time, and that's because this coincided with the Great African Rise. If you grew up in the UK and you grew up as an African in the UK, you will remember there was a time where being African was not cool in the way that it is today. Compared to our Caribbean counterparts, they had a lot more social capital in this country because they'd been here for a while. They'd been here for generations, which allowed them time to build that social capital. We just got here. But that attitude started to change, especially with the rise of Afrobeats. And as Afrobeats got more popular, we were then blessed with Afro swing, and then Afro swing opened a whole Black British African pride wave that's worth an entire video, in my opinion. But that's essentially what Afro swing is. It's a blend of those genres, and it was really telling of the time that these people were coming up in. It's a genre that blends African but also Caribbean rhythms like Afrobeats and dancehall, but with the cadence of UK rap and trap and grime. It's a really special genre. It's special to me. Afro swing fashion fused modern UK streetwear with a lot of rich, mainly African, but also some Caribbean diasporic aesthetics. So there was a lot more color during this era, and especially associated with that subculture. There were a lot of dashikis and bold African style prints being mixed with jeans. Anyway, the UK underground scene is an accumulation of this lineage and then some. It still pulls from some of the streetwear DNA that runs so vividly through the prior genres. A really good example of this is Lost Boys. They're a fashion brand that are really embedded within this scene, within this subculture. You know, they have affiliations with artists like Len and Jim Legacy. They make tracksuits, and a lot of the fashion, stylistically, it does draw from the parallels that I've just explained. But I do think, though, at its core, this UK underground scene, it's very heavily inspired by Black punk, specifically 70s, 80s British punk. Punk did not start in Britain, contrary to popular belief, contrary to popular opinion. It was first lit by American garage bands like the Ramones in New York in the mid-70s, but Britain took punk and turned it into a full-blown national cultural phenomenon, complete with its defined look. Offensive graphic tees, leather, studs, spikes, safety pins, bondage gear. Britain got there first as a mass movement, and Britain coined this look. 2 film recommendations that I would say go away and watch if you want to know more about this. Jubilee, mwah. Excellent film. Such a good film. The plot is a bit higgy-haga, but visually, when you sit and you watch that film, you will draw so many parallels to this UK underground subculture. Another film that you should watch is the punk rock film. Amazing, 10 out of 10. But if you want to go and dive deeper on punk and really be able to see the parallels, I really recommend you go watch those films.
Long as the music's loud enough, we won't hear the world falling apart.
There is an American underground rap scene, and they're doing something slightly visually adjacent, and the two often get lumped into one box, but I think that is unfair and not an accurate representation of what's going on here. British punk is baked into this UK underground rap scene, fashion scene, in a way that it just isn't in Americans' rap scene, their American underground rap scene. And that shows even down to something as small as the Union Jack flag versus the American flag. Black Americans are by now quite widely accepted and regarded as Americans in a way that Black British we're not quite there yet. Black Americans have been there for a while, for generations. They're all settled, but Black Brits, we literally just got here. We still get told to go back to where we come from. We still get asked by white British people where we're really from. That sentiment, that language doesn't land as well on an American family in Atlanta or Chicago whose family have been there for 200 years. We just got here. Because of that, an American underground rapper holding up the American flag just doesn't land the same. It means something completely different to when our rappers in the scene hold up the flag. And it's because there's less of a need to reach for that national symbol because their belonging isn't really in question, whereas for us it is. Which is exactly what makes the Union Jack flag on a rapper within the scene, in the subculture, feel so loaded. It reads as defiance. It reads as a direct answer to the far right's anti-immigration rhetoric, which has been spoken about so many times. It acts as a stand against so many people telling people who look like they do within the scene to go back to where they came from and that they don't quite fit in. And also the fact that Britain was never really theirs to claim in the first place. And that's also why wearing it and holding up the Union Jack so proudly and loudly is a form of anti-defiance, which in itself is very inherently punk. And that's why I'm saying this scene has so much to do with punk than it does any other genres, not just in terms of the symbolism and what it looks like, but also in terms of what it stands for. Punk is very anti-establishment, and everything that the scene is doing is very punk in what it stands for. Now, do I think all these guys, these rappers, are sat around the table discussing the socioeconomic, political state of the world and whether if they put a flag as the cover for their next album, it's going to make da-da-da? Probably not. That being said, everything is political, even if people aren't aware of it. Oh, jump scare. Where's my neck gone? It's me from the future, editing. And I just realised you've not hit the subscribe button. What are you playing at? Go on. Give us a click. This subculture, this underground scene, it's a lot closer to runway as compared to genres like grime and drill and Afro swing. And that's not to say that a tracksuit can't be runway, because it absolutely is. And we've seen a lot of fashion houses and lines, you know, especially Burberry, trying to reel that back in. That being said, there is nothing casual about the fashion of this subculture. In the same way I specified, you know, what items of clothing you can associate with grime, there are UK underground equivalents too. Pieces like Balenciaga Alaska Fur suede boots, Heidi Slimane era jeans, number 90s, Osbat chains, Moalola polos, Balenciaga mask butterfly glasses, city bags. The brand Osbat in particular is by a designer named Sid, who's a British Zimbabwean designer. And in particular, he's been credited as one of the driving forces behind this subculture's aesthetic. Pause magazine put it really well. The brand's uniform of leather, distressing, and gothic imagery has influenced London's underground and the style which permeates within it. And I know I just listed a bunch of really pricey, really high-end items and brands, but this subculture are a pretty crafty lot, and I think that's part of the DNA of the look. Speaking anecdotally, it genuinely is a DIY subculture. People, especially the girls, are pulling in looks very resourcefully rather than buying a finished high-end designer outfit off a rail. And when they are buying off rails, conveniently, the rise of this subculture has nicely coincided with the rise of secondhand fashion. So your Depop's and your Vintage, charity shops, archive sales, estate sales, regular kids with regular budgets can get their hands on pretty cool things that would have been pretty unachievable prior to this boom. And where that's not enough, there's always fast fashion, pulling from the exact same aesthetic at a fraction of a price. The artists at the top of the scene, the artists making the music, leading the scene, they have budget, and if not budget, at least social capital, which means they can afford to really do their big one when it comes to dressing. Where the wider subculture is thrifting and DIYing and hunting on platforms like Depop and Vinted and going to archive sales, these artists are in one-of-one custom work made specifically for them. Alex, known online as Just Shaved My Head, is a London-based fashion stylist and Central St. Martin's graduate who is deeply embedded within the UK's underground rap scene. He styled artists including SD Kid, Sinner, Femi Guerrero, Len, and YT. He designed these tartan grills for Femi Guerrero, which I thought were really cool. Gaucho World magazine described his aesthetic as one built around leather layered over mesh with elongated coats, sculpted trousers, and hardware that feels intentional rather than decorative. Another key figure is Maxime Black, also a Central St. Martin's graduate, known for avant-garde futuristic designs that push craftsmanship in unusual directions, incorporating techniques like vacuum pressing and 3D printing. He's also very closely tied to the scene as well, having designed custom stage outfits for artists like YT. There's an extra layer here with this UK underground rap scene subculture that British punk never ever had, and that's the diaspora. Moalola is Nigerian. Sid, the designer behind Osbat, is Zimbabwean. This generation, this subculture is rewriting that old British punk aesthetic by wearing it alongside their heritage and the things that make them who they are, and a sound that does the same job as well. That is the British and Black British experience that sets the scene apart from its global counterparts, especially the American counterparts.
Rise up to dance to my new Fuji garbage. Rise up to dance to my new Fuji garbage.
What's up to you, little graduate? Tẹ́lá fẹsẹ̀ kan ṣọ́ọ̀bù wa. Ìgbà yín máa kú, èpò ayé máa tọ́bù. Our English ń pè ní your cup runneth over.
I go dance with my sweetie, oh.
The equation is simple. Let me get it ready. Come with any wish of yours, and Meji Mama shall double your blessing. So that the party whether you need the world to give you your flowers. Is it children? Men work. Evil cash. One thing to do, get your jersey and show up in your cup to run it over.
The question I have for the people of today is, should nature suffer so that we can feel better about ourselves? The short answer is no, and that's why at Peak Television we use faux fur for our new Dame Dog ear. Looks just as good as the real thing, and no animal had to be harmed in the process. It's okay, it's not real fair. You can go home now.
Now, this level of cunt, this runway ready, archive heavy, genuinely avant-garde look used to be reserved for artists who had already made it. You dress like this for a magazine cover, a brand campaign after the fact, after you'd already made it. This subculture, the rappers especially, they dress like this every day, regardless of the fact that some of them haven't even sold out arenas yet. And that unsettles a lot of older heads within the industry. I have seen older Black figures within this industry mock the look and mock the sound online and offline, and it's a bit crazy to see. They don't get it, they don't understand it. And one person that comes into mind in particular is this guy called Lippy on Twitter. Lippy is a fairly prominent voice in Black British music commentary. He also is known for reviewing music on platforms like Link Up TV. He's someone who's really built a real standing in the Black British music space, and he has made some claims that I want to really closely examine. Black youths fumbled the underground thing. My tweets about your scene have gone more viral than some of you lot's tunes, but apparently I'm chatting shit, lol. This next tweet is in response to someone else's tweet. So someone said, the UK underground's influence is now spreading to the south of the US, to which Lippy replied and said, it sounds like the UK alternative youths because they sound like Americans. It ain't cause they're influencing them, lol. They dress like them and they talk like them. I don't think the UK alternative youths have their own image yet. He then said, I get that they don't want to be like any of the genres that came before, but by trying to be different, they've tricked themselves out of their position. A few things to address here. Number one, I think we need more voices documenting the scene. It's still forming, it's still being written about in real time, and it deserves a lot more serious commentary. But the problem is, documenting a subculture requires actually knowing it. And I think it's worth interrogating what qualifies someone as being able to speak on something with this much confidence. And I'm not saying Lippy needs to go away and get a journalism degree and he needs formal qualifications in order to have a valid opinion, but I mean something closer to proximity. Has this person actually sat inside the thing that they're describing? And if the answer is no, have they done enough research to quantify what they're saying for them to be able to speak so confidently and definitively on the thing that they're critiquing? Lippy has real earned credibility within other spaces, genres that he has lived through, genres that he understands from inside. But that credibility does not automatically transfer to a scene that he's observing rather than inhabiting. I think that expertise in one area doesn't automatically translate as expertise in the next one. And when the culture that you're speaking on is this young, first of all, Black British identity in itself is still being defined. This subculture, the UK underground, even more so. It's a baby. And I think that getting it wrong from a position of assumed authority does so much damage because there aren't yet enough loud voices around to correct voices like Lippy and to correct the record. Take the no image claim that he made specifically, right? I've just walked through where the scene comes from, you know, British punk, the Union Jack, leather, a cool Britannia revival, diasporic references stitched directly into the clothes. That is not America's borrowed image. That is a very specific British lineage, and it's filtered through a very specific Black British lens. Saying that they don't have their own image yet doesn't really describe the scene. To me, it describes the limits of how closely he's able to look at it. Then there's him saying that these people are trying to be different. His framing here, framing it as an act, as kids performing difference rather than people simply just living a different experience to him. That is the monolith trap. If you came up in grime and this doesn't sound like grime and it doesn't look like grime, the instinct is to call it a failure and tell these people that they're failing and that they fumbled, rather than taking it for what it actually is, which is something different. It's a thing that's made by different people living a very genuinely different moment. Their reality and how they come up and how they experience is going to be different to other genres. That's inevitable. That's what happens when you're building and creating something new. And to me, that's the real issue underneath all of this. I don't think it's fair that people can get to tell someone that their lived experience isn't real or try and discredit that lived experience just because it doesn't match the era that they recognize. Ultimately, though, I do think that this friction is a good thing. Not being legible to the genre that came before you is kind of the whole point of a subculture. I was the biggest fake mink hater for a while, don't get me wrong. And I'll be so honest, I changed my mind because I realized I was being somewhat parasocial. My thing with fake mink is he came out with a lot of very bold very, very bold statements. For example, there was one time when he said that he was the greatest in the scene. And while I get having an ego is a necessary prerequisite for creative success, I do think he's very silly for saying that because he isn't by any quantitative measure. Then for him to title his album as London Savior when he's still quite a juvenile, it gives me the same as when Sunshine Benz, bitches bees, I'm going to insert her clip. But it's like when she came on Twitter and started saying to everyone, I'm better than all these bitches, but you are a white lady rapping in an industry that is made up of black women. So who are the bitches and who are you? But that's not where my issue with Fake Mink lies. And it's less to do with him and more to do with systemic issues. POC is not and has never been synonymous for black. And Fake Mink's Punjabi Algerian heritage contributes very little to this conversation. He could be Venezuelan, he could be anything, but he's not black ultimately. So his success actually isn't a win for anyone in the context of this being a black genre. Even though, yes, he's broken down ceilings and Drake brought him out, he's global, that is not a win for anyone, I'm not going to lie. I think that people use the fact that he's a person of color as a way to discredit black people's very valid critiques about his privilege. And I think it's just as much an FU as it would have been if he was white. If you're not black, for you to out-succeed everyone around you and then come with this ego, it's very tricky. But again, that's not me saying that having an ego is a bad thing. I think it's necessary, especially in rap. But I think, again, it's a nuanced conversation. And I think the whole Fake Mink thing makes the conversation very, very tricky to navigate because he's not black, but he is a person of color. But like I said, person of color and black is not synonymous. And I know that everything I'm saying is a relatively bold claim, but I like making bold claims. And what is a bold claim without a bit of critical thought and nuance? Enter SD Kid. Okay, people have rightfully pointed out the fact that SD Kid has outpaced everyone else that came before him. And that is at a speed that doesn't add up without talking about white privilege. That being said, SD Kid was a white working class kid from Liverpool, a city with some of the worst outcomes in the country for boys exactly like him. So while yes, his privilege did work for him, it's also true that he didn't start on easy ground. And both of those things sit in the same sentence, and it's kind of an uncomfortable conversation to trick around because I think it's really easy for people to put his success down to white privilege. But in the context of where he came from, it is really hard to just solely put it down to that. So if it's not just, non-black people succeeding faster, then what is it? And for me, this comes down to language. Underground is a relatively difficult word to gatekeep. In culture, underground refers to art, to music, and subcultures that exist outside the commercial mainstream. It's broad, linguistically, and semantically, it doesn't really belong to anyone. And that's exactly why calling it underground makes it very dangerous. I think that calling this genre the underground opened a door that drill and Afro swing never really had because those names were never up for grabs. Nobody outside the culture could waltz into drill and claim it as their own. And the underground doesn't have that same lock on it. It's synonymous with anti-establishment in the same way that punk was. So it reads as open territory, something that anyone can step into, even though black artists laid the actual foundation for it. That lineage was never supposed to be up for grabs, but because nobody has named it, no one's really officiated it, that means no one is guarding the door and anyone can come in. The door being this open, this fast, feels very premature to me. You can't hand the keys out to a house that's still being built. Appropriation is inevitable. It was always going to happen. It's just the timing and the lack of gatekeeping around it that is making the conversation really tricky. Another point that I want to raise is that there's also some confusion around the semantics of the term. Lancey has said infamously that he thinks the genre should be called overground because it's so big now. But ultimately, guys, regardless of how big this genre gets, even if all these artists go out and win a Brit Award, it will never ever be mainstream. And I know this contradicts everything that I've just said, but walk with me. Even if we change the name and we decide to call it Overground, it's still an underground subculture in the same way that punk and rock are hugely popular and they have millions and millions and millions of people listening to that music. It's still not mainstream. That is the entire point of a subculture. Even if we change the name and called it Overground, it's still an underground subculture. In the same way that Playboi Carti, Destroy Lonely, Ken Carson, and all these guys can sell out tours and have millions of streams, but they can never be mainstream because inherently the sound, what they are built on, goes against the grain, which is why Playboi Carti is probably not going to be on the UK top 40 charts consistently in the way that a Drake is, for example. Oh my God. Hi. You made it to the end. Thanks so much for staying. I'm going to give you guys my closing thoughts. What excites me the most about this genre, this scene, this crowd of people is specifically the direction in which it's headed in. As I've said already, the diaspora runs so vividly throughout this entire scene. It's in the production, it's in the clothes, it's in the accents. But I think that what's happening now goes so far beyond influence. The UK underground is building these very genuine, authentic relationships with other Black cities like Paris and Joburg and Lagos. And it's not in a way where they're just borrowing from one another. They're collaborating and working together to create and to grow. And it's being done at a pace that previous generations, previous iterations of British rap never quite cracked. For years, we kept asking Black British music to crack America. I think every new genre and every new artist was measured by how many US cosigns they could get. But what I love about this group of people, this genre, these rappers is they don't seem particularly interested in getting that validation. They've decentered America, and instead I think that they're looking sideways towards people who they share similar histories with, similar diasporic experiences, and therefore similar futures with. That to me is a much more interesting map of the world. I do also think, on a more broader, personal, opinionated note, Black people get really weird. Well, Black people in the UK get really weird when we talk about subcultures and archetypes of Black people in this country, which I completely understand. I think that when you start describing a subculture, it feels as though you're putting people into a box. And like I said, Black British people are really weird with boxes. You're either an Eden Black or a Recess Black or a Canary Wharf Black. You can't be all three at the same time. But being part of a subculture is not an identity prison. I'm also not saying that everyone who dresses like this and everyone who listens to this music and that all these rappers are all one person, you know. I'm not trying to say that everyone who listens to this music all lives the same life. I think it's just simply recognizing that groups of people, especially young people, create shared languages to make sense of the world around them. White Britain has been very, very comfortable talking about their subcultures, like the punks and the mods and the goths and the ravers for decades. And I think that we as Black Brits should be just as comfortable recognizing our own cultural movements and where they emerge. As I've said a million times, Black British identity is still relatively very young compared to many other communities. We literally just got here, so we're still building our traditions and our aesthetics and our own cultural language, and it's going to be messy. That is inevitable. Identity is always very messy while it's still being formed, and this scene, this subculture is a really good case study for that, and exactly why I decided to make this video. Anyway, I hope you guys really enjoyed this. If you stayed to the end, please click subscribe. And yeah, oh my God, I'm gonna sleep for 40 days and 40 nights, but please leave me a comment. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe. And yeah, it's been a long one, guys. I really enjoyed this. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give this a big fat thumbs up. Mwah.